especially with the growth of capitalism and what Vidramuna Singh has pointed out in his article as the growth of Enlightenment ideology, there came to be a distinction drawn between humans and nature. I think that is the key fundamental distinction that we are still battling today. It is because of this that we understand that development is the conquest of nature. Now, we see in the other articles in the lovely LST review that since the idea of resettling the North Central province, and after that, through the Mahavali scheme and so on and so forth, and then this National Master Plan or whatever it's called, which really gets enforced after the end of the Civil War, after 2009, where new areas are diverted into growing various kinds of cash crops like aloe vera and bananas and pineapples and so on and so forth. And then what will happen, and I think as the other speaker said when talking, that what we don't understand is that we wouldn't have land in the dry zone if we didn't have elephants there. Now, that's a marvelous example to explain to people, and I am a novice in this business because I've never really studied the relationship between nature and animals, but I've thought about it a little bit, but Vidura was very kind and just asked me to come and join your panel. But if you think of that, you begin to realize that conquering land or conquering elephants is completely turned the matter on its head. Because as he said, there are only 3% of forest cover in the wet zone. And there are no elephants. But elsewhere, and 14% is low, but at least there's 14%. And then there are elephants, and the presence of that protects the reservoirs, the rivers, and the wetlands and so on, so that we can actually have agriculture. So what I am saying is we have to completely rethink the relationship between man in Marx's sense, but human, and nature. And so it is not about conquering nature and turning it into our slave that matters. And in that equation, animals are just there to be decimated. So we have to turn that around. Now, saying all this, saying national policies are bad and good policies are needed is easy. But I don't have a policy, I think that's the challenge, right? So maybe we have to think deeply about our relationship with animals and understand it. So I don't know whether time is limited. Shall I stop there or shall I go on? Okay. So one thing I wanted to talk about, coming out of Vidura's example in his paper of the hierarchy of animals, which comes from the great chain of being, where you have circuses, where you have so-called natives and exotic animals all perched together and so on and so forth. I thought we can spend a little time thinking about the distinction between wildness and tameness. Because you see, in the title of the review, it says human wild animal conflict. Is that correct? My journal is over there, but wildlife. No, wildlife. So wild is there. Now this is important to note. So what about tame animals? So let's take some examples. Now, there are tame animals that we like to keep at home. cats and dogs. So if you keep cats and dogs at home, commonly we refer to dogs and cats by their breed. So there are some dogs can be carried in a handbag. Chupuhua is, I believe, the way you say that dog's name. Then there are others, the German Shepherd, or what we used to call the Alsatian. They are fierce guard dogs. So they reflect, in some sense, there is a relationship of reflection there between the human and the animal. These are not wild. Same with cats. Now you take another set of animals, and there are many tame animals like horses and so on. But let's take one familiar to us, the elephant. And this, Sakuntala also was talking about the elephant a lot in her introductory remarks. It comes up in several of the papers. Let us look at tame elephants in Sri Lanka and how they are positioned. You'll have to give me a minute while I refer to my paper. Now, Thailand is a good comparative example to Sri Lanka because it is a Theravada Buddhist country, but it was not colonized. So because it wasn't, there are some traditions in Thailand that exist, which well may have existed in Sri Lanka, but we don't have access to. So I will just say a quotation. During the coronation of King Mahavajiralongkorn Rama X in May 2019, that's quite recently, a procession featured 11 elephants adorned with ceremonial decorations. These elephants marched near Bangkok's Grand Palace, kneeling in homage to the new king, reflecting their esteemed status in royal traditions and also the dominance of the king over the lord of the jungle, now tame. I think it's important to understand here that there is yet another hierarchy that has come into being. Now, Munasingha's prior hierarchy has to do with white racism and its extension into the animal world, as it were, which then proclaims that all humans are equal but different. This is an old internal hierarchy which we have too, because we see, and other historical research in Sri Lanka has shown that when you have a small temple and you don't have an elephant, in pre-colonial times, people used to parade with a portrait of the king in a procession, in a perahera, and in the Asala Mahaperahera and so on, you have the great Maligava Tusker, as it were, but that Tusker is there and is tame because he comes under the king. This is my view at least, sacred no doubt, but comes under the king. So this is important to understand, and I want to go on now to talk about the other part of anthropocentrism, which is anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism means seeing animals like humans or seeing humans like animals. Now again in Vidura's paper, there is a reference to a pig, a mother pig being tried for the death of a human child, and the pig is convicted of this and hung upside down by its legs, but the children are released on the grounds that they're very young. Now this happens in the 15th century. This seems all very odd to us. We have to go back and remember that King Caligula, who might have been a little mad, wanted to appoint his horse as consul in the Roman Senate. The consul is the person who leads the Senate. That is disputed by some historians. But animal trials in Europe were very common. and they've been documented across various European countries, with France and Switzerland reporting numerous cases. And French historians estimate that approximately 200 such trials occurred between 1120 and 1740. Now, all very interesting, but we do have to remember that in these cases, it is the animal who is tried and punished. Now, it is a form of anthropomorphism, but it's interesting for us to understand who is the victim, as it were. I like to return to that at the end of my talk, a little more, about 5 minutes. Now, we have a whole tradition of anthropomorphism in Sri Lanka. If we look at folk tales, various stories that we have inherited, there's a rich tapestry of animals that talk and speak. In English fiction, I am fond of these books: Alice in Wonderland, Wind in the Willows, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Winnie the Pooh and Paddington. All books where animals speak and they appear to be human. I mean, like, for example, Paddington likes marmalade, and I like marmalade because Paddington likes marmalade. Now, animals are treated as human. But here, difference is rendered absent. Equality becomes sameness. So they become the same as us. And because they are the same, they are equal. That is not necessarily the way that equality has to work. Different things can also be equal. So let me close, and I'm telling this story because it is dear to me. It was dear to the founder of this institute, which, because I am an old person, I remember when he was alive. So let me close by referring to another story which allows us to learn of justice from the life of an animal. King Elara, also known as Elaran, is celebrated in Sri Lankan history for his unwavering commitment to justice during his reign over Anuradhapura Kingdom from 205 BC to 161 BC. To ensure that all subjects had access to fair judgment, King Elara installed a bell near his bedchamber. This bell was connected to a rope extending to the public area, allowing anyone who felt wronged to ring it and seek the king's intervention. This system underscored Elara's commitment to impartiality and accessibility to his judicial practices. One day, Elara's son, while driving a chariot near the Tissa reservoir, accidentally ran over a cow, resulting in its death. The grieving mother cow rang the justice bell to seek retribution. Upon discovering that his own son was responsible, Elara, adhering to his principles, ordered that his son be executed in the same manner by being run over by a chariot. This demonstrated his unwavering commitment to justice even when it involved a personal loss. Now, this is a story that is recounted in the Mahavamsa, and I really want to draw attention to the reversal of justice here. That it is the prince who then is punished, not the animal. And the animal seeks justice, and we learn, I think, the story is remembered because we learn much about justice itself by the presence of the animal demanding justice for her calf. Now, if you look at the logo of the Law and Society Trust, and earlier on it was a tiny bit was on the screen, but it is on your journal, you will find that there is a cow pulling a bell near a great wheel. And you see, I think that it's a wonderful example to remember, and to remember how much Neelan loved that story, and to think that I will use this word that he liked to use, liberal. Liberal here doesn't mean neoliberal. It has nothing to do with economics. It is liberal of us to understand the limitation of our own values, to learn from another species that justice is something that can have expanding boundaries. So, all right, I'll stop there.